The morning sun cast long shadows across the courtyard of St. Margaret's Academy when Marcus Chen first laid eyes on Princess Elena Castellanos. She sat alone at a corner table in the dining hall, her dark hair falling like a curtain around her face as she picked at her breakfast with trembling hands. The other students gave her a wide berth, whispering behind cupped hands about the broken princess who had arrived 3 weeks earlier. Marcus had heard the stories, of course. Everyone had. Princess Elena, third in line to the throne of Valdoria, had supposedly suffered a complete mental breakdown following a terrorist attack on the royal palace 6 months prior. The official statement spoke of exhaustion and the need for privacy, but the tabloids painted a different picture. They described a young woman so shattered by trauma that she could barely speak, let alone fulfill her royal duties. The prestigious boarding school in Switzerland had become her refuge, though refuge seemed too kind a word for what appeared to be exile. Her parents, the King and Queen of Valdoria, had quietly enrolled her under an assumed name, hoping the mountain air and academic routine might somehow piece their daughter back together. The faculty had been briefed to expect a fragile student who needed careful handling and minimal expectations. Marcus, however, saw something different as he observed the princess from across the dining hall. While her classmates saw weakness in her downcast eyes and quiet demeanor, he noticed the way her gaze swept the room with calculating precision. When a group of older boys knocked over a younger student's tray near her table, Marcus watched Elena's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. Her fingers, which had been shaking moments before, suddenly stilled. As the school's newest psychology teacher and former military counselor, Marcus had worked with trauma survivors for over a decade. He recognized the signs of someone fighting an internal battle, but he also saw something the others missed. Beneath Elena's withdrawn exterior lay coiled tension, like a spring compressed to its breaking point. Their first interaction came during his introductory psychology class. Elena sat in the back row, as always, her notebook open but her pen motionless. Marcus had designed the semester around practical applications of psychological principles, believing that understanding the mind's workings could help students navigate their own challenges. Today we're discussing the difference between genuine helplessness and learned helplessness, Marcus announced to the class. Can anyone give me an example of a situation where someone might appear powerless but actually possesses significant strength? The class remained silent, as usual when Elena was present. Students seemed reluctant to speak freely around the princess, though whether from respect or discomfort, Marcus couldn't determine. Miss Santos, Marcus said, using Elena's assumed surname, what do you think? Have you ever encountered a situation where appearances were deceiving? Elena's head snapped up, surprise flashing across her features. For a moment, Marcus thought she might speak, but then her eyes dropped back to her desk. Her knuckles, however, had turned white as she gripped her pen. After class, Marcus lingered as students filed out. Elena moved slowly, gathering her things with deliberate care. As she passed his desk, Marcus spoke quietly. The assignment for next week is to write about a time when you or someone you know overcame a difficult situation. It doesn't have to be dramatic or public. Sometimes the greatest victories happen in silence. Elena paused at the door, her back still turned. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then, without looking back, she left. That evening, Marcus reviewed Elena's file in his office. The official documents painted a picture of academic excellence derailed by tragedy. Before the attack, she had been studying international relations at Oxford, fluent in 6 languages, and actively involved in her country's youth development programs. She had also earned a black belt in Taekwondo and competed in national equestrian events. The file mentioned the attack only briefly. Armed militants had stormed a charity gala Elena was attending, taking hostages for 14 hours before special forces ended the siege. 3 people died, including Elena's personal bodyguard, a man who had protected her since childhood. According to the report, Elena had been found in a supply closet, catatonic and unresponsive. But Marcus noticed something curious in the medical reports. Despite being held captive for 14 hours, Elena had sustained only minor injuries. No signs of assault or struggle. The psychological evaluation mentioned selective amnesia regarding the events, which the doctors attributed to trauma. Yet something about the clinical language felt incomplete, as if important details had been deliberately omitted. Over the following weeks, Marcus began to observe Elena more closely. She arrived at every class precisely on time, never late, never early. Her notes, while sparse, were meticulously organized. She avoided eye contact with most people but seemed hyper-aware of her surroundings, always choosing seats with clear views of exits. During lunch periods, Elena would sometimes walk alone in the school's gardens. Marcus noticed she favored paths that wound through the more secluded areas, places where the manicured lawns gave way to wilder growth. On one such afternoon, he decided to take his own walk along a parallel path. He found her standing beside a small stone fountain, watching koi fish swim in lazy circles. Her posture was different here, away from prying eyes. Straighter. More alert. When a branch cracked in the woods behind them, Elena's reaction was instantaneous. She spun toward the sound, her body falling into a defensive stance that Marcus recognized from his military days. A squirrel emerged from the underbrush, and Elena slowly relaxed. That's when she noticed Marcus watching from the adjacent path. For a moment, they simply looked at each other across the garden. Then, Elena turned and walked away, but not before Marcus caught something in her expression. Not embarrassment at being observed, but calculation. As if she were evaluating whether her cover had been blown. That night, Marcus made an unusual decision. Instead of filing his routine reports to the school administration about Elena's progress, he wrote something different. He described a student making gradual improvement, showing signs of engagement in class discussions, and beginning to interact more normally with peers. It wasn't entirely false, but it wasn't the complete truth either. The following week brought an unexpected test. During an afternoon study period, chaos erupted in the school's main building. A kitchen fire had triggered the evacuation alarms, and students poured from classrooms in confusion. In the midst of the crowd, Marcus lost sight of Elena. He found her 20 minutes later in an empty hallway, crouched beside a younger student who had fallen and injured her ankle during the evacuation. Elena was speaking in low, calm tones while fashioning a makeshift splint from torn fabric and pencils. "Help is coming," Elena was saying to the frightened girl. "You're going to be fine. The important thing is to stay calm and keep your weight off that foot." Her voice was steady, authoritative. This wasn't the fragile princess everyone believed her to be. Marcus watched as Elena coordinated the girl's care until the school nurse arrived, then quietly slipped away before anyone could thank her. But Marcus had seen enough. The way Elena had assessed the injury, the confidence in her voice, the efficient use of available materials, these weren't the actions of someone broken by trauma. They were the responses of someone with training, someone accustomed to taking charge in crisis situations. That evening, Marcus made a decision that would change both their lives. Instead of simply observing from a distance, he would begin to engage Elena directly. Not as a teacher trying to help a damaged student, but as someone who suspected there was far more to her story than anyone realized. He began with small changes to his class structure. Instead of traditional lectures, he introduced scenario-based discussions. Students were presented with complex situations requiring analysis and decision-making. While most struggled with the abstract nature of these exercises, Elena showed a different kind of engagement. During a discussion about crisis leadership, Elena finally spoke up. The class was analyzing a hypothetical situation involving a natural disaster and limited resources. "The primary consideration isn't just immediate survival," she said quietly, causing several students to turn in surprise. "You have to think about the psychological state of the people you're trying to help. Fear makes people unpredictable. If you can maintain calm and project confidence, even with limited resources, you can accomplish more than someone with better supplies but poor leadership presence." The observation was sophisticated, practical, and spoke to personal experience. Marcus nodded approvingly. "That's an excellent point. Can you elaborate on what specific techniques might help maintain calm in such a situation?" Elena hesitated, glancing around at her classmates' interested faces. For a moment, Marcus thought she might retreat back into silence. Instead, she straightened slightly in her chair. "Voice control is crucial. People respond to tone as much as words. And you need to give people specific, manageable tasks. When someone is panicking, abstract reassurance doesn't help. But if you can get them focused on a concrete action, it gives their mind something to anchor on. The rest of the class listened with growing attention. This was the longest speech any of them had heard from the mysterious Elena Santos. Marcus seized the moment. It sounds like you've given this considerable thought. Have you studied emergency management? Elena's eyes met his directly for the first time since arriving at the school. In that gaze, Marcus saw intelligence, wariness, and something else. A flicker of recognition, as if she understood that he was seeing through her carefully constructed facade. I've read about it, she said simply, but her tone suggested much more than casual reading. After class, Elena didn't hurry away as usual. She approached Marcus's desk slowly, her expression thoughtful. Mr. Chen, she said, using his name for the first time. Your teaching methods are different from what I'm used to. How so? Most teachers want students to memorize information. You seem more interested in how we think. Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying her carefully. I believe understanding how people think is more valuable than knowing what they think. Especially during difficult times. Elena nodded slowly. And if someone has been through something difficult? Something that changed how they see the world? Then, understanding their own thought processes becomes even more important. Sometimes we develop coping mechanisms that serve us in one situation but limit us in others. Elena was quiet for a long moment, considering his words. What if someone isn't actually as damaged as everyone believes? What if they're just careful? Marcus felt his pulse quicken. This was the closest Elena had come to revealing anything about her true situation. Being careful isn't the same as being weak, he said carefully. Sometimes appearing vulnerable is the smartest strategy available. Elena's eyes sharpened slightly. And, what would you do if you discovered that someone was stronger than they appeared? Would you expose them? Marcus met her gaze steadily. I would ask myself why they felt the need to hide their strength. And whether they might benefit from having at least one person know the truth. Elena stared at him for several more seconds, and Marcus could practically see the calculations running behind her dark eyes. Finally, she picked up her backpack. Thank you for the lesson, Mr. Chen. I'll think about what you said. As she left the classroom, Marcus knew they had crossed a threshold. Elena was no longer simply a traumatized princess hiding from the world. She was a young woman with secrets, someone who had chosen to appear broken for reasons he was only beginning to understand. That weekend, Marcus made another unusual decision. Instead of spending his free time in the faculty lounge or exploring the local village, he chose to take a hiking trail that wound through the mountains above the school. It was a challenging route, requiring both physical fitness and careful navigation. He wasn't entirely surprised when he spotted a familiar figure about half a mile ahead on the trail. Elena moved with sure footing over the rocky terrain, her pace steady and confident. This wasn't a casual walk. She was pushing herself, testing her limits. Marcus followed at a distance, curious to see where she was going. The trail eventually led to a small clearing overlooking the valley below. Elena had stopped there, but she wasn't admiring the view. Instead, she was going through what appeared to be a carefully choreographed series of movements. Martial arts forms. Advanced ones. Marcus watched from the cover of nearby trees as Elena flowed through complex sequences with precision and power. Her movements were fluid, controlled, and spoke to years of serious training. This wasn't someone learning self-defense. This was someone maintaining combat-ready skills. After 20 minutes, Elena concluded her practice and sat cross-legged on a fallen log, gazing out over the valley. Her breathing was controlled, barely elevated despite the intensive workout. Marcus was about to quietly retreat when Elena spoke without turning around. Are you going to keep hiding in the trees, Mr. Chen, or would you prefer to join me? Marcus felt his face flush with embarrassment at being caught, but also with admiration for Elena's awareness. He emerged from the tree line and approached the clearing. I apologize for following you. That was inappropriate. Elena glanced at him with what might have been amusement. You're not very good at surveillance. Too much noise, and you forgot to account for wind direction. Marcus raised an eyebrow. You seem to know quite a bit about surveillance yourself. Perhaps. Elena patted the log beside her, an invitation to sit. Why did you follow me? Marcus considered his words carefully as he settled beside her. Because I don't think you're who everyone believes you are. And who do I appear to be to you? Someone who is choosing to be underestimated. Someone with training and skills that don't match your supposed background. Someone who is hiding not because they're broken, but because they're planning something. Elena was quiet for several minutes, studying the valley spread out below them. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a different quality. Clearer. More decisive. If that were true, what would you do about it? Offer to help, if I could. Or at least promise not to interfere. Elena turned to look at him directly. Why? Marcus had been asking himself the same question for weeks. Because I've spent enough time around people who have been through real trauma to recognize the difference between someone who is broken and someone who is strategically damaged. And because I suspect that whatever you're planning, it's probably justified. Elena studied his face for a long moment, as if weighing risks and possibilities. Finally, she made a decision. The attack on the palace wasn't what the reports claimed, she said quietly. Neither was my response to it. Marcus waited, sensing that pushing for details would cause Elena to retreat again. People believe I'm here to recover from psychological damage. That's what my parents believe. What the doctors believe. What the media believes. Elena's voice grew stronger. But I'm not broken, Mr. Chen. I'm preparing. For what? Elena stood and walked to the edge of the clearing, her silhouette sharp against the afternoon sky. To make sure that what happened to my people never happens again. As Marcus drove back to the school that evening, his mind raced with implications. Elena wasn't a victim hiding from trauma. She was someone with a plan, someone who had chosen to disappear from public view for reasons far more complex than anyone realized. The question now was whether he was prepared to help her, whatever those reasons might be. Because one thing had become clear during their conversation in the mountains, Elena Castellanos was not going to remain hidden much longer. And, when she emerged, Marcus suspected the world would be very surprised by what they found. The relationship between Marcus and Elena shifted dramatically after their encounter in the mountains. While she maintained her withdrawn public persona, their private interactions revealed glimpses of the formidable woman she truly was. Elena began staying after psychology classes, engaging in discussions that went far beyond academic requirements. Traditional therapeutic approaches assume that trauma victims need to process their experiences through discussion, Elena said one afternoon as they reviewed case studies. But, what if verbalizing certain events actually weakens someone's ability to respond effectively in the future? Marcus looked up from his papers, intrigued. That's a sophisticated observation. Are you thinking of specific scenarios? Elena's fingers drummed silently on her desk, a habit he'd noticed when she was weighing how much to reveal. Hostage situations, for example. If someone survives by making calculated decisions under extreme pressure, forcing them to relive those moments through therapy might undermine the mental conditioning that saved them. You speak as if you have personal knowledge of such situations. Elena met his gaze directly. Don't all of us carry knowledge we'd rather not examine too closely? Over the following weeks, these conversations became a routine. Elena would pose theoretical questions that were clearly anything but theoretical. Marcus began to understand that she was testing him, gauging whether he could be trusted with increasingly sensitive information. The breakthrough came during a seemingly ordinary Tuesday evening. Marcus was grading papers in his office when Elena appeared at his door. Her usual careful composure was strained, and she glanced nervously down the hallway before entering. I need to tell someone the truth, she said without preamble. And you're the only person here who seems capable of handling it. Marcus gestured for her to close the door and take a seat. Elena remained standing, pacing to the window that overlooked the school grounds. The attack on the palace 6 months ago wasn't random terrorism, she began. It was a coordinated attempt to eliminate the royal family. The militants had inside information about security protocols, guest lists, and evacuation procedures. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. Inside information suggests a betrayal, yes. Elena's voice was steady despite the gravity of what she was revealing. Someone within the palace hierarchy orchestrated the entire operation. Someone who wanted my family removed from power. The official reports made no mention of this. Elena turned from the window, her expression grim. Because the investigation was compromised from the beginning. My father trusted the wrong people to handle the inquiry. They buried the evidence and blamed everything on external terrorist groups. Marcus leaned forward in his chair. Elena, these are serious accusations. If what you're saying is true, it is true. Elena moved to his desk, pulling out her phone. She scrolled through what appeared to be encrypted files. I wasn't found catatonic in a supply closet, Mr. Chen. I was hiding there after I escaped from the main ballroom. But not before I saw things. Recorded things. Documented things that certain people believed died with me. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. You let everyone believe you were traumatized to protect yourself while you gathered evidence. And to protect my family. If the conspirators knew I had witnessed their planning meeting, knew I could identify voices and faces, they would have found ways to silence me permanently. A broken princess receiving psychological treatment abroad posed no threat to anyone. Elena showed him her phone screen. Even from across the desk, Marcus could see what appeared to be audio files, photographs, and detailed documents. I've spent the last 6 months building an airtight case. Names, dates, financial transactions, communication records. Everything needed to expose the network that tried to destroy my family. Marcus sat back in his chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what Elena had revealed. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm ready to act, and I need someone here who can verify my story if something happens to me. Someone who understood that I wasn't actually broken. What kind of action are you planning? Elena's expression hardened in a way that made Marcus understand why she had hidden her true nature for so long. I'm going to return to Valdoria in 3 weeks. During my brother's coronation ceremony. The same people who tried to eliminate my family will be there, believing they're safe because the damaged princess remains tucked away in a Swiss boarding school. Marcus felt alarm bells ringing in his mind. Elena, that sounds incredibly dangerous. If these people were willing to stage a terrorist attack, they won't expect me to be there, and they certainly won't expect me to be capable of exposing them publicly. The element of surprise is my greatest advantage. But surely there are other ways to handle this. Official channels, international authorities. Elena shook her head firmly. I tried those routes initially. Every investigation was blocked, redirected, or mysteriously concluded without findings. The corruption goes too deep for conventional approaches. Marcus studied Elena's determined expression and realized she had thought through every angle. What exactly do you need from me? If I don't make contact within 48 hours of the coronation ceremony, I need you to release copies of all this evidence to international media outlets. I've prepared detailed packages for 6 different news organizations. Elena handed him an encrypted drive. Everything is on here. Names, documentation, audio recordings of the planning meeting I witnessed. It's enough to bring down not just the immediate conspirators, but the entire network they represent. Marcus held the drive carefully, as if it might explode. Elena, this is the most important thing anyone has ever asked you to do, she finished quietly. I know. But I also know that you understand what it means to fight for something larger than yourself. She was right, and Marcus knew it. During his military service, he had made similar calculations about risk and necessity. But this was different. Elena was young, alone, and planning to walk directly into a situation where powerful people had already demonstrated their willingness to kill. There has to be another way, Marcus said. What about recruiting allies within the palace? Surely not everyone is compromised. Elena considered this carefully. I've identified a few people I believe I can trust. My brother's chief of staff, Captain Rodriguez, has been asking questions about the investigation. And there's a journalist, Maria Santos, who has been pressing for access to the full attack records. Santos. That's the surname you're using here. She's my cousin. One of the few family members I know wasn't involved in the conspiracy. Elena managed a small smile. Maria has been investigating independently, but she lacks the crucial evidence I possess. If I can reach her during the coronation festivities, we can coordinate the exposure. Marcus felt slightly more hopeful about Elena's chances. So you won't be acting entirely alone. No, but I also can't rely entirely on others. Too much communication beforehand increases the risk of exposure. The plan has to be simple and direct. Over the next hour, Elena outlined her strategy in detail. She would return to Valdoria claiming to have recovered sufficiently to attend her brother's coronation. Her parents would be thrilled by this apparent progress. During the ceremony itself, she would present her evidence publicly, ensuring that the entire royal court and assembled dignitaries witnessed the revelations. The beauty of the plan is its boldness, Elena explained. No one expects a public confrontation during a coronation ceremony. The conspirators will be focused on maintaining appearances and networking with foreign dignitaries. They won't be prepared for a direct challenge. Marcus had to admit the strategy had merit, but he remained concerned about the risks. What if they try to discredit you? Claim you're having a psychological episode? Elena's smile was sharp. Let them try. I have 6 months of medical records showing steady improvement under therapeutic care. And the evidence speaks for itself. Audio recordings don't lie, Mr. Chen. Neither do financial transaction records or documented communications. As the evening progressed, Marcus found himself increasingly impressed by the depth of Elena's preparation. She had anticipated numerous potential complications and developed contingency plans for each scenario. This wasn't the impulsive action of a traumatized young woman seeking revenge. It was the carefully calculated campaign of someone who understood both the stakes and the risks involved. You've been planning this since the day you arrived here, haven't you? Marcus asked. Before that. I started developing the strategy while I was still in the hospital recovering from the attack. Everyone assumed my silence was due to trauma, so they spoke freely around me. I learned quite a bit about who could be trusted and who could not. Elena's composure remained steady, but Marcus noticed tension in her shoulders. The hardest part wasn't gathering evidence or developing a plan. It was maintaining the pretense of being broken while watching my family struggle with guilt about my supposed condition. For the first time since entering his office, Elena's voice carried genuine emotion. My parents blame themselves for not protecting me during the attack. My brother has been shouldering additional royal responsibilities because they don't believe I can handle the stress. Every day I maintain this charade, I'm allowing good people to suffer needlessly. Marcus understood now why Elena had been so determined to act. The conspiracy had harmed her family in multiple ways, and every day of delay compounded that damage. When you return to Valdoria, how will you explain your sudden recovery? Gradually at first. I'll arrive claiming that the therapeutic environment here has helped me process the trauma sufficiently to attend the coronation. Then, as the ceremony approaches, I'll demonstrate increasing confidence and engagement. By the time I'm ready to present the evidence, it will seem like natural psychological healing. Marcus shook his head in admiration. You've thought of everything. I hope so. There won't be opportunities for improvisation once I'm back in the palace. They spent another hour reviewing contingency plans and communication protocols. Marcus would monitor international news coverage during the coronation period, watching for any signs that Elena's plan had succeeded or failed. If she didn't make contact within the specified timeframe, he would begin releasing the evidence to media outlets. As Elena prepared to leave his office, Marcus felt compelled to make one final attempt to dissuade her from such a dangerous course. Elena, I have to ask. Are you certain this is the only way? The risks are acceptable compared to the alternative. Elena's voice carried absolute conviction. If I do nothing, the people who tried to murder my family remain in positions of power. They'll continue undermining the monarchy from within, and, eventually they'll try again. Next time, they might succeed. Marcus nodded slowly, recognizing the weight of responsibility Elena carried. And, if something goes wrong with your plan? Then, at least the truth will emerge eventually, through the evidence I'm leaving with you. Justice delayed is still justice, Mr. Chen. Elena paused at the door, looking back with an expression that seemed years older than her 22 years. Thank you for seeing who I really am instead of who everyone expected me to be. That meant more than you know during these months of pretending. After Elena left, Marcus sat alone in his office for a long time, staring at the encrypted drive she had given him. He understood now why she had chosen him as her confidant. His background in military psychology had prepared him to recognize operational thinking when he saw it. Elena wasn't a victim planning revenge. She was a soldier preparing to complete a mission. The following 3 weeks passed with surreal normalcy. Elena continued attending classes, maintaining her withdrawn public persona while secretly finalizing her preparations. To outside observers, she appeared to be making gradual progress in her recovery, engaging slightly more in discussions and showing increased interest in current events. But Marcus could see the transformation happening beneath the surface. Elena moved with growing confidence, her posture subtly changing as she prepared to shed her protective facade. During their private conversations, she displayed tactical thinking that reminded Marcus of briefings he had attended during his military service. I've been monitoring palace communications through secure channels, Elena reported during one of their final meetings. The guest list for the coronation includes several foreign intelligence officials who have been tracking the original terrorist investigation. If I can coordinate with them during the evidence presentation, it will be much harder for the conspirators to suppress the information. Marcus marveled at Elena's ability to think several moves ahead. You're turning the coronation ceremony into an international forum. Exactly. With diplomatic immunity and media coverage, foreign witnesses become a powerful protection mechanism. The conspirators won't be able to simply make the problem disappear. As Elena's departure date approached, Marcus found himself both worried about her safety and genuinely excited to see her plan unfold. She had transformed from a supposedly broken princess into a formidable operative preparing to expose one of the most sophisticated conspiracies he had ever encountered. 2 days before her scheduled return to Valdoria, Elena made one final request. If this works, if I succeed in exposing the conspiracy and protecting my family, I want you to know that it wouldn't have been possible without your support. You gave me the space to be myself when everyone else needed me to be damaged. Marcus felt a surge of pride mixed with concern. Elena, you accomplished this through your own strength and intelligence. I just provided a safe environment. Sometimes that's exactly what someone needs to find their way back to who they really are. Elena's departure was deliberately low-key. She claimed to be feeling well enough to visit family during her brother's coronation, a natural step in her supposed recovery process. The school administration was pleased with her apparent progress, and her parents were overjoyed by the news. As Marcus watched the car carry Elena away from St. Margaret's Academy, he realized he was witnessing the end of one of the most remarkable performances he had ever encountered. For 6 months, Elena had convinced the world that she was broken while secretly building one of the most comprehensive cases for justice he had ever seen. Now all that remained was to see whether her carefully laid plans would be enough to expose the truth and protect her family from future threats. Marcus returned to his office, placed the encrypted drive in his personal safe, and began the most difficult waiting period of his life. The morning of Prince Carlos's coronation dawned clear and bright over the capital city of Valdoria. Marcus watched the ceremony coverage from his office at St. Margaret's Academy, his laptop displaying multiple news streams while his phone remained close at hand, waiting for Elena's promised contact. She looked radiant on television, a far cry from the withdrawn figure who had sat in his psychology classes just days earlier. Dressed in royal blue silk and wearing her grandmother's sapphire tiara, Elena smiled graciously as cameras captured her arrival at the cathedral. News commentators praised her apparent recovery, describing her presence as a triumphant return to public life following her courageous battle with post-traumatic stress. Marcus studied every frame, looking for signs of what Elena was really planning. She moved with perfect royal composure, greeting foreign dignitaries and family members with appropriate warmth. To the watching world, she appeared to be exactly what everyone hoped, a young princess who had overcome tragedy to support her family during this momentous occasion. But Marcus could see subtle differences that others would miss. Elena's posture was more alert than her previous public appearances had shown. Her eyes scanned the crowd with systematic precision, cataloging faces and positions. When she spoke to certain officials, Marcus noticed her hand movements were deliberately positioned to activate what appeared to be concealed recording equipment. The coronation ceremony proceeded with magnificent pageantry. Prince Carlos looked every inch the future king as he knelt before the archbishop, accepting the crown that had passed through 14 generations of Valdorian royalty. Elena stood with the rest of the immediate family, her expression appropriately solemn for the historic moment. Marcus checked his watch. According to Elena's plan, she would make her move during the reception following the ceremony. The ballroom where the conspirators had originally planned their attack would be filled with the same power brokers who had orchestrated the assault 6 months earlier. They would be celebrating what they believed was their successful manipulation of the royal succession, unaware that their primary target had spent months preparing to expose them. The television coverage shifted to the reception, showing elegantly dressed guests mingling in the same ornate spaces where violence had erupted the previous year. Marcus felt his pulse quicken as cameras followed Elena through the crowd. She was working the room methodically, approaching specific individuals with what appeared to be casual conversation. Then, something unexpected happened. Instead of the public confrontation Marcus had anticipated, Elena simply vanished from the camera feeds. One moment she was visible greeting the French ambassador, and the next she was nowhere to be seen among the gathered dignitaries. Marcus's phone remained silent. His laptop showed continuing coverage of the reception, but Elena had disappeared entirely from the visual narrative. Anxiety began gnawing at his stomach as minutes stretched without any sign of her presence or any disruption in the festivities. 45 minutes after Elena's disappearance from the cameras, Marcus's phone finally buzzed with an encrypted message, Phase 1 complete. Broadcasting in 10 minutes. Watch Channel 7 International. Relief flooded through Marcus as he quickly switched to the designated news channel. The anchor was in the middle of a routine report about the coronation when she suddenly paused, pressing her hand to her earpiece. Ladies and gentlemen, we're receiving breaking news from Valdoria. Princess Elena Castellanos is about to make an unscheduled statement from the royal palace. We're going live to our correspondent in the capital. The screen shifted to a familiar setting, the palace's main press room, where official royal announcements were typically made. Elena stood behind the podium, but she was no longer alone. Flanked by Captain Rodriguez, whom she had identified as trustworthy, and a woman Marcus didn't recognize, Elena faced a hastily assembled group of journalists and officials. Her transformation was complete. Gone was any trace of the fragile princess persona she had maintained for 6 months. Elena stood straight and confident, her voice clear and authoritative as she began to speak. 6 months ago, my family and I survived what the world believed was a random terrorist attack. Today, I am here to reveal the truth about that night, and to present evidence of a conspiracy that reaches into the highest levels of our government. A murmur ran through the assembled crowd, both in the press room and among the reception guests whose conversations had begun to quiet as word spread of Elena's unexpected appearance. The attack on the palace was not perpetrated by external terrorist organizations. It was orchestrated by individuals within our own government who sought to eliminate the royal family and install a new political structure more amenable to their interests. Elena gestured to Captain Rodriguez, who stepped forward with a tablet computer. Captain Rodriguez will now present documented evidence of financial transactions, communication records, and planning meetings that prove this conspiracy. Marcus watched in fascination as Elena's plan unfolded with military precision. Rodriguez displayed bank transfers showing payments from shell companies to the militants who had carried out the attack. Phone records revealed coordination between palace officials and external contacts on the night of the assault. Most damning of all, Elena played audio recordings of planning meetings where conspirators discussed timing, logistics, and the intended elimination of specific family members. The woman standing with Elena was introduced as Maria Santos, the journalist cousin Elena had mentioned. Santos provided context for the evidence, explaining how official investigations had been systematically undermined and how key witnesses had been intimidated or silenced. The conspiracy we are exposing today represents nothing less than an attempted coup, Elena declared. These individuals believed that by eliminating my family and staging the attack to look like external terrorism, they could justify implementing emergency measures that would effectively end constitutional monarchy in Valdoria. As Elena spoke, Marcus noticed additional activity on other news channels. International intelligence officials were confirming receipt of the evidence packages Elena had prepared. Foreign ministers were issuing statements calling for thorough investigations. The story was spreading globally faster than any attempt at suppression could contain it. But the most dramatic moment came when Elena directly addressed the conspirators who were undoubtedly watching from the reception. To those responsible for planning and executing this betrayal, let me be absolutely clear. I was present during your planning meeting on March 15th. I witnessed you discussing the elimination of my family as if we were obstacles to be removed rather than people you had sworn to serve. I recorded your conversations, documented your financial transactions, and spent 6 months building an unassailable case against every individual involved in this conspiracy. Elena's voice carried a steel edge that made Marcus understand why she had been so confident in her abilities. You believed I was broken by the trauma of your attack. You were wrong. I was gathering evidence. And now the world knows exactly who you are and what you attempted to do. The press conference continued for another 20 minutes as Elena and her allies presented a comprehensive overview of the conspiracy. Names were named. Financial evidence was displayed. Audio recordings were played that left no doubt about the guilt of the conspirators. Marcus watched in amazement as Elena fielded questions from journalists with the composure of someone who had prepared for every possible inquiry. She provided specific details about the attack that contradicted official reports. She explained her strategy of appearing damaged to protect herself while building her case. She outlined the extensive international cooperation that had been necessary to compile such comprehensive evidence. When asked why she had chosen to reveal this information during her brother's coronation, Elena's answer was both practical and symbolic. My brother's coronation represents the continuation of legitimate royal authority in Valdoria. By exposing this conspiracy today, we ensure that his reign begins with the truth rather than being built on lies and cover-ups. The people of Valdoria deserve to know that their government has been cleansed of those who would betray their trust. As the press conference concluded, Elena made one final statement that resonated with particular power. For 6 months, many people believed I was a broken princess who needed protection and care. Today, I hope they understand that I was actually a warrior who was preparing for battle. That battle is now complete, and justice will follow. The aftermath unfolded with stunning speed. Within hours, arrest warrants had been issued for 12 high-ranking government officials. The European Union announced immediate support for transitional justice measures in Valdoria. International media outlets provided wall-to-wall coverage of what commentators were calling the most sophisticated royal conspiracy in modern history. Marcus's phone buzzed again with a message from Elena. Thank you for believing in me when no one else could see who I really was. The truth is out, and my family is safe. Mission accomplished. But Elena's victory extended far beyond simply exposing the conspiracy. In the weeks that followed, Marcus watched as she transformed from a figure of sympathy into a symbol of resilience and strategic thinking. Universities invited her to speak about crisis management and psychological resilience. Military academies requested case studies of her operational planning. International organizations sought her insights on combating corruption and protecting democratic institutions. The young woman who had been written off as irreparably damaged by trauma had instead demonstrated a level of strategic thinking and moral courage that inspired people around the world. Elena had not only saved her family and exposed a dangerous conspiracy, but had also redefined public understanding of what it meant to survive and overcome adversity. 3 months after the coronation, Elena visited Marcus at St. Margaret's Academy. She arrived unannounced, walking into his classroom after his final period ended. The confidence and authority she had displayed during the press conference remained, but Marcus also saw something new, genuine peace. "I wanted to thank you in person," Elena said, settling into the chair she had occupied during their many private conversations. "Not just for protecting my evidence, but for giving me a place where I could be myself while I planned." Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying the remarkable young woman who had trusted him with one of the most important secrets of the century. "Elena, I have to ask. During all those months when everyone believed you were struggling with trauma, were there moments when you doubted yourself? When the pretense became difficult to maintain?" Elena considered the question carefully. "There were nights when I wondered if I was strong enough to see it through. The hardest part wasn't maintaining the facade with strangers. It was watching my parents blame themselves for my supposed condition. Every time my mother looked at me with pity, or my father avoided discussing royal duties because he thought I was too fragile, I had to remind myself that temporary deception was necessary for permanent justice." "And now? Any regrets about the way you handled the situation?" "None." Elena's voice carried absolute conviction. The conspiracy had to be exposed completely, with irrefutable evidence, or the perpetrators would have found ways to escape justice. If I had acted too quickly or revealed myself too early, they would have discredited the evidence or eliminated witnesses. Marcus nodded, understanding the sophistication of Elena's strategic thinking. "What's next for you?" Elena smiled, and Marcus saw glimpses of the young woman she might have been in different circumstances. "I'm returning to Oxford to complete my degree in international relations. But I'm also working with several governments to develop better protocols for identifying and responding to internal conspiracy threats. Apparently, my particular skill set has become quite valuable. The supposedly broken princess becomes an expert in national security. The warrior who is always there becomes someone who can help others find their own strength," Elena corrected gently. "You taught me something important during our conversations, Mr. Chen. Sometimes the most important battle is not letting others define who you are based on their limited understanding of your circumstances." As Elena prepared to leave, Marcus felt compelled to share something that had been on his mind since the coronation. "Elena, I want you to know that what you accomplished here goes beyond exposing a conspiracy or protecting your family. You've shown people that survival isn't just about enduring trauma. It's about transforming challenge into purpose." Elena paused at the classroom door, looking back with an expression of gratitude. Everyone needs someone who can see their potential when they can't see it themselves. You were that person for me during the most crucial months of my life. After Elena left, Marcus returned to his desk and pulled out the encrypted drive she had given him months earlier. He deleted the files, knowing they were no longer needed. Elena had succeeded beyond anyone's expectations, not because she was unbreakable, but because she had understood that sometimes appearing broken was the strongest strategy available. In the months that followed, Marcus would often think about the lessons he had learned from Elena's remarkable demonstration of resilience and strategic thinking. She had taught him that trauma survivors could also be tactical thinkers, that apparent vulnerability might mask sophisticated planning, and that sometimes the people who seem most damaged are actually the ones best equipped to fight for justice. The story of Princess Elena Castellanos became a case study in psychology programs around the world, though few people understood the full complexity of what she had accomplished. Marcus would tell his students about the importance of looking beyond surface appearances, of understanding that strength could manifest in ways that seemed like weakness to casual observers. But, privately, Marcus understood that he had witnessed something much rarer than a successful operation or a clever strategy. He had seen a young woman transform herself from victim to victor through pure force of will and intelligence. Elena had refused to let circumstances define her, choosing instead to define herself through her actions and her commitment to justice. The supposedly broken princess had indeed revealed the warrior hidden inside. But, more importantly, she had shown the world that warriors don't always announce themselves with obvious displays of strength. Sometimes they work quietly, strategically, and with devastating effectiveness to protect the people and principles they hold dear. Elena's story would continue to inspire others who found themselves underestimated or counted out. She had proven that being written off by others could become a powerful advantage for those intelligent and determined enough to use it. The lesson was simple but profound: never mistake someone's tactical silence for actual defeat. Marcus kept a newspaper clipping from the day after Elena's press conference. The headline read, "Princess Reveals Conspiracy, Saves Royal Family." But Marcus preferred his own mental headline, "Student Teaches Teacher That Strength Comes in Many Forms." It was a lesson he would carry with him for the rest of his career, and one that would fundamentally change how he approached every student who seemed damaged or lost. Because Elena had taught him that sometimes the people who appear most in need of rescue are actually the ones best positioned to rescue others.